Yalimas, everyone. My name is Ali Shivji, and I'm the Honorary Secretary for the Aga Khan Economic Planning Board for Canada. Thank you very much for joining this webinar today regarding managing financial health in challenging times. We're about to get started with the webinar itself, but before we do that, I want to make sure that everyone is is ready for and also knows how to use all of the functional tools of this webinar. And one of them is the chat as well as the poll functionality on your little control panel that will show up. And so in order to do that, we're going to just start with a simple poll that we'd like people to fill out, and also give us a chance to get everyone familiar with the poll functionality of the webinar. And so again, if you haven't seen this yet, then on your right-hand side, you should be able to see the actual poll. In addition, there's also a question section of that control panel. And we'd ask you all to start and continue to ask questions throughout the webinar. We're actually going to try to incorporate questions throughout the conversation today. And so to the extent that you have any questions as we're going, please let us know what they are right away, as we'll try to be asking them as we're going, as opposed to just waiting to the end, where sometimes we run out of time and we aren't able to get as much value out of the conversation. So I'll just hold this up there just for a couple more seconds for those of you who are just joining us. Want to make sure that you're aware of the poll functionality and the ability to use it. And so if you can just take 1 minute to go and put your poll stuff down there, that would be great. Okay, and one of the things we're going to try to do throughout the webinar today is we have a couple of interactive polls, which will hopefully at least gauge people's engagement on certain topics, but also give us a sense of what's going on. And so I'm just going to close this poll, but I'm also just going to share the results with everyone to give you a sense of who's on the webinar today. And so, Jeff, you'll see this as well. It looks like we've got students, working professionals, unemployed, self-employed, sorry, and retired. So helpful to know kind of what we're looking at from an audience perspective. Okay, so with that, I'd like to quickly just outline a couple of things from the perspective and for the Jamaat itself. Overall, the COVID-19 pandemic has drastically affected the Canadian economy, businesses, and individual families. It's understandable that these changes are causing a lot of worry and confusion on how to cope and what steps to take next. We are here to help and hold your hand. As part of the Ismaili Institution's comprehensive COVID response efforts, the EPB has 5 major pillars that we provide services in. 1, skills and employment. 2, financial health. 3, housing. 4, Ismaili Business and Professionals Association. 5, entrepreneurship and the future of work. Today's webinar is going to primarily deal with the aspects of number 2, financial health, and number 5, the future of work. I'd like to just quickly start off by telling you a little bit about recapping some of the highlights of this past week from an overall COVID perspective in Canada, as well as telling you a little bit about what to expect going forward in the week ahead. Over the past week, the following announcements were made by the government. 1, grants for students with disabilities or dependents were doubled. 2, applications for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy were opened. Next week, EPB will be launching a series of webinars focused on practical strategies to help you identify and apply for the benefits and the opportunities that are available to you. Today's webinar speaks to that topic from a personal perspective, but starting next week, including Sunday, we'll actually have a webinar on the topic of protecting yourself against fraud and cybercrime. And next Thursday, May 7th, we'll have a webinar on how to apply for government programs through your bank, specifically with Nadeem Hirji and a senior executive from BMO on the topic of 1, what are the specific programs that are available through banks or in collaboration with your bank? 2, what are some of the structures for repayment that you need to understand? Who will qualify? what do you have to have prepared in order to approach your banker, and most importantly, which programs are best suited for which type of business and size. And we will be actually going through different different business examples, as well as different sizes. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed presenter this evening, Jeffrey Schwartz. Jeffrey is the Executive Director. I would say Jeffrey, I gotta go back and forth a little bit, but we'll work with Jeff too. But Jeff is the Executive Director of Consolidated Credit. And in his role, Jeff is responsible for all activities related to the operation and managing of all credit counseling, creditor relations, and personal finance educational endeavors. Jeff is a dedicated professional focused on assisting individuals and families in need. Now, before I ask Jeff to tell us a little bit more about Consolidated Credit and the KOFE program, I just want to quickly mention that the Smiley Economic Planning Board for Canada has had a long-standing relationship with Consolidated Credit and the KOFE program. And in that context, Consolidated Credit and KOFE have actually extended a free service to all Jamati members to be able to enroll in all of the programs that are part of Consolidated Credit. And we'll take you through that a little bit later. But just know that as we are speaking with Jeff today, know that all of the program services and discussions that we have are fully and completely available to all Jamati members, and things that we encourage you to take advantage of. So with that, Jeff, I guess let's just start by, can you just give me a quick understanding of how you would define, Consolidated Credit and the work that you do with clients, and what would people come to you to get help for?
Thanks, Ali. Typically, we think about it from the standpoint that we're dealing with individuals and consumers and their families. So it's less on the corporate side, it's more on the individual side. And what we want to do is we want to end their financial crises that they may be going through. And we do that through counseling, we do that through education, and in some cases it's intervention, right down to the individual debt management side of things. And we're handling files and working with clients from coast to coast to coast. We've been doing this for a number of years, and we're one of the largest nonprofit credit counselors in the country. We're set up as a nonprofit, and we're a registered charitable organization. One more thing I would add there.
Oh yeah, of course, go ahead.
Sorry, is how we do this is typically through one-on-one counseling, but we also do it in facilities and platforms like this, where we're coming into organizations and doing lunch and learns or workshops, or more specifically through webinars like these, where we can really captivate a number of people at one time and cover a broad spectrum of topics.
If I wanted to ask you one question before we went on, which was, can you just tell me, is it just people who are in financially dire straits that come to Consolidated Credit, or are there more options than that? Like, when you think about the people who come to you, is it only people who are, they're bankrupt, or they're in the worst possible situation, or is there more of a variety of people that use your services?
Absolutely not. It's a great question, and I'm going to tell you that probably 80% of the people that reach out to us in one way or another are looking to enhance their financial literacy or their education around how they're managing their finances. 20% of the people we're looking at probably are people that do need some specific help, and we've got to deal with them individually.
And so there could be people who aren't, or wouldn't you consider to be in total dire straits, but they want to improve their financial health, and therefore they may engage your services.
Absolutely. So as an example of that, I mean, if they go to our website, if they go to KOFE, they're going to see a lot of the topics that we cover are based on life events. So if someone's planning a wedding, or if someone's going to university, or if someone's recently gone through a divorce, or single parents, it could be any life event that they're challenged with financially, we're likely going to cover it. And that's how we're structured, because we know that different people go through different things at different stages in their life, and we have to be there for them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, because you mentioned the students as well, and I think there are, we want to drive it home today that this webinar is, and I'll actually quickly go over to the agenda of the webinar for people to see, but ultimately the agenda for this webinar today is very specific, but it's also catered to everyone. And it's important for people to understand that this isn't just about one particular category of people. It's actually about many categories of people, and together we can do that. And so I don't, Jeff, actually, I'll let you tell us about the agenda. How would you kind of address what we're going to talk about today and how we're going to be relevant for our guests and people who are watching?
Well, I think what's really important here is the time that we spent putting this together, Ali, and really identifying what people could leave with that would be of use to them as soon as they finish this webinar. And we're going through so much. We're inundated with press and information. We're inundated with the issues related to COVID. We're inundated with our new reality, whether we're working or not, or reduced hours. So we want to help people understand what they can do right now. And one of the things that we're going to go through and actually show you where to find these things is how can you take advantage, how can you take best advantage of what's available out there in terms of government programs and some of the resources. And then we're going to take the next step, because some people may not be feeling the pinch as much as others. And if that's the case, what should they be doing right now? And what opportunities do they have to look at this time as an opportunity for growth so that they can secure their financial future and maybe achieve more of their financial goals? So there's going to be a lot of stuff here, but I think what we focused on in putting this together was really good, valuable resources that they can take away. And as soon as they finish the webinar, they can do some of the work on their own to get ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is really important. And, you know, as we go through, I just wanted to again re-emphasize to everybody a couple of housekeeping items for the webinar. The first is that we're going to be free-flowing throughout this webinar on these specific topics. And so please start to ask your questions right away. And specifically on these topics and the ones that you'll see as we're going through, so that we can integrate the questions right into the webinar throughout the entire webinar itself. Secondly, I want to make sure that, you know, we will try to answer all the questions that are asked today. For those that are not, we will make sure that those questions are worked into the future content that we're developing, and/or we'll find a way to follow up on questions that we think are very relevant, you know, that people have asked. And lastly is that all discussions during the course of this webinar are the views and opinions of the speakers themselves. They don't necessarily represent or reflect views of their employers or their affiliates. And we really don't want people to take any of the information we talk about today as like constitute like financial, legal, tax, or investment advice. These are conversations, these are ways to inform the Jamaat, but they're not meant to be used as the one and only source that you use when you're going to make final decisions. Cool. Okay, so as we go through, I think one of the things actually before, Jeff, I didn't get to the next slide, one of the questions that came up here was, you know, when should one consider reaching out for help? And I know that we're going to talk about that later, but just in the context of starting it right up front, how would you answer that question to the audience today? Like, should it be that only a certain percentage of people should be asking for help, or that should be like, how would you view that one, or kind of take it in that regard?
I've got to say, whenever anybody has a question, I mean, like too often the case is that we're talking to people that are in dire straits and they've already gone so far down the spectrum that we really have limited choices or options available to them. But if they use our resources and tools as planning opportunities, as soon as they're entering into some sort of topic that's of interest to them, that's when they reach out and ask. So that's what we're here for, and that's why we're set up and how we're set up. So even if you just kind of want to test the waters as to what your financial situation is and how you're doing, then absolutely reach out. And if you can't find something on our website, pick up the phone and call, because there's an opportunity that we may want to include something additional there, or we just may need to point you in a different direction.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. So I want to just kind of start off today with a couple of, or not start off, we're kind of in the middle of it, but I want to actually just take a couple of minutes to kind of take people through a couple of thought starters. One, you know, during a time of crisis, during a time of difficulty as we have today, but just in general in life, I think it's important to say, first, take the time to take care of yourself physically, mentally, and financially. We've heard many times, you know, take care of yourself physically, take care of yourself mentally, spiritually, but financially is also really important, and that's what we're here to talk about today. The second thing is that there are many opportunities available to you and your families, and we want to make sure that you're aware of them. No matter what your position is, no matter where you are, no matter what situation you're in, there is support available for everybody. And that ultimately these opportunities today, particularly, are designed to further your financial situation so that you can set yourself and your family up for opportunities post-crisis. This idea, as the Imam has said in his Dalika, how do we position ourselves to build and rebuild? So incredibly important and part of the conversation we're going to have today. So with that, let's jump right in here. Jeff, where do I start? Like, I don't know where to go, don't know what to do, kind of a bit like, I feel like my financial situation may not be the best that I'm confident about, but I just don't know where to go. How would you suggest that one starts off that conversation or that process?
And I want to reiterate that question because you actually touched on it earlier on in the slides. Is there are so many things coming at us. I mean, if we go back a week or two ago, the first thing that came out from the government was a 10% wage subsidy. Then very quickly it went to a 75% wage subsidy. And then very quickly after that, it went to a 75% wage subsidy for people who are working reduced hours or seasonal or in a gig type job. So things are really changing quickly, and they're changing every day. So my suggestion to everybody is get informed, find out what's going on. And if you have some questions, just try and search them out, seek out help from us or somebody else to say, okay, well, what relates to me? And I need to kind of push away all the stuff that doesn't, and I can really zero in and focus on what is relatable or what is relevant to me. It's stay informed. And that's kind of the thing that I was referring to, is that with this environment changing so frequently and so quickly, we've got to stay on top of this information. So we're hearing a lot of news about the disease and everything, but there's a lot of other stuff out there that's fantastic stuff, and the government is looking at helping us deal with this. And I think they're doing a great job. They may be a little slow on a couple of things, but their ideas are definitely in the right place, and they're responding to us. And that even comes down to some of the things that came out for students this week, and how easy it is to apply for this stuff, and then hopefully it starts flowing as well. So kind of neat. The last point here is look for ways to shift your budget now. And this is really kind of focusing on everybody. It's not just focusing on people that are in trouble. It's focusing on everybody. And I would rather start with the people that potentially are feeling a little bit of the pinch right now. And really, finance is simple. If you're having trouble with your finances and you're struggling to make ends meet, I want you to think of the equation is that either I'm not earning enough or I'm spending too much. It's either on the expense side of things or it's on the income side of things. And that's where you really want to start. And we're going to get into budgeting a little bit and how important it is, but to really identify what those things are. And as we go through the seminar, the budget today is different than it was yesterday because of all these programs that are available out there, because of all these creditors or people that you deal with on a daily basis have so many different programs out there. There could be a rent deferral program for you. There could be a mortgage deferral program out there. Credit card payments could be deferred. All these things which we typically want to pay first, well, hold on, we may not have to pay them first now under this situation. So there are opportunities, and I want people to start thinking about, okay, what's happening today is different than what's happening yesterday, and how can we set ourselves up for tomorrow, much like Ali said earlier on. So I think these are certain things that people need to think about today to make sure that they're in a better position than they are.
Well, and I think the other interesting part too, as we think just about that topic and how you set yourself up for a better position, the other interesting part is that things are changing so quickly and on a regular basis that, like, we have 20 volunteers that are just managing on a regular basis, looking at all the benefits that are coming out, summarizing them and putting it up on the website for the Jamaat. If you're not actively doing that every single day, you may not even realize that a new thing has come out and the benefits completely changed, or that there is now a benefit that may apply to you. So asking for help and keeping yourself informed is super important. Now, I know that one of the things that we want to talk about today is this idea of, do you have budgeting and understanding financial wherewithal and understanding that part. So I'm going to throw up a quick poll here in terms of asking, do you have an active budget for your household? And we'd love just for everyone to be able to just kind of quickly answer this question in terms of what of how they would approach this specific subject. And while they're doing that, Jeff, maybe we can talk a little bit about this idea of how does one assess their own personal situation and start to understand some of the key things that are important in that regard.
Well, first off, I think we've got to set a benchmark. We've got to figure out where we are today, and sometimes that means taking all your statements, printing off all your online statements, and saying, okay, where am I at? How much do I owe? What credit cards am I using? Take a look at your online bank statement and say, okay, well, this is how much I'm spending. This is where it's going. So sometimes you really have to put a number to these things. You lay it out on a coffee table and say, okay, this is my pile of debts and I'm going to add that up. This is my pile of expenses and I'm going to add that up. And this is where my income is coming from on a regular basis. And income just isn't from your job. It could be government support. It could be support from other avenues. It could be a part-time job. So the assessment is key here because you have to know where you're starting from in order to plan from that perspective. And it's going to identify holes or gaps where you need to fill. And unless we start off with assessing that, we're never going to know. Wow, look at these poll results. I hope everybody can see
the results are in. So we asked people if they have an active budget, and people said, well, 43% yes, I update it regularly. 23% said, yes, I have one, but I don't really stick to it. 24% said, no, I'm doing just fine without one. And I want to be one of those people. And then 9% said, no, too much work, don't know how. Interesting. Okay. So that's helpful context.
And it's very interesting because most of the times when we're doing a workshop, Ali, we see kind of 75 to 80% don't have a budget. And let me take that back. They may have had a budget, but they're not using it. I think the real key here is not only do you have a budget, but you're using it regularly. And so with this group, which is actually amazing, and it's not totally surprising because they're taking time out of their day to be on this webinar and learn more. So they're probably one step ahead of the curve. And I'd say it's probably kind of 60-40, 50-50 with respect to people that are doing a budget or have actively used a budget and are putting things together, which is amazing. That's fantastic.
So let's talk about this idea of savings, right? And we're going to get to the context of savings in a second, but I'm going to throw up another quick poll here around savings because I know that one of the things that has really started to kind of shift our horizon is that this COVID pandemic has changed the game, right? It's changed all kind of bets are off. All bets are off, according to that movie. And so if you think through that a little bit, when we think a little bit about the concept of savings, it'd be interesting to understand how many members of our webinar today have an emergency savings account, or effectively how many months of emergency savings would you say that you have? And while I'm reading this poll, Jeff, I'll ask you one question just come in that I think is an important one just around this topic, which is around, the question is it a good idea to declare bankruptcy as a family? And what does recovery from that look like? Now, I know we may not be able to answer all of that right now, but I'm not sure if that's something you want to keep in mind or if there's something that you may want to touch upon in terms of how people would even start to make that decision. And, the ability or how much emergency savings they have may be a real factor for them in thinking through that.
Hey, and we're going to get more into that, Ali, and that's an excellent question. And it's funny. I've had this conversation, and not necessarily with you today, because I've had a couple, but with two different people on this very topic on when we come out of this, what are Canadians going to look like? And we'll get into it a little bit more later. But as a society, we're tremendously over indebted, and that was before COVID. That was before we had our income reduced. So now all of a sudden, what shape are people in while they're waiting for money to come in, and what shape are they going to be after once they start going back to work? Wow.
Yeah. Here's the quick poll. So again,
that's impressive.
That is impressive. And that is really impressive, and that's awesome to see that so many people have emergency savings of 6 months plus. What I think is interesting, and I think just given our conversations, Jeff, I feel confident enough to say this part, which is it's actually those who have more than 3 months of savings, and particularly those with 6 months plus, that I'm most worried about. And so maybe we should go to the next slide and talk a little bit about why do we think that is? And I know I want to tee you up a little bit about talking about this idea of yesterday versus today and the differences that are there. And so maybe we'll start there in terms of how we interpret the world and how we think about both benefits are out there as well as approaching the next steps.
And this is great. I agree. I mean, first off, I think let's go back to the idea that we have to be informed. We have to understand what programs are out there and what are relevant to us, and really determine, if you look at these things, and we're going to get more into detail about how you can find them and how you can determine whether or not you're eligible. But your budget yesterday is different than it is today, and it's definitely different than what tomorrow is going to look like. And what I mean by that is, with all these programs and support systems out there and the potential for creditors to defer payments, and you potentially having trouble putting food on the table, and that's key, what are you taking advantage of, and how are you utilizing your funds? Because normally I'd suggest to you that, and I think we talked about this earlier, when you set up your budget, you're thinking your mortgage and rent is first, your car payment is second, your utilities maybe third, your insurance payments. All these things are the ones that get paid first. But today I'm going to say, let's put the brakes on that, because there may be an opportunity to take a step back and defer those payments. It's not like you're avoiding them, you're just deferring them until such a time when things kind of get back to normalcy a little bit. And what can you do with those funds that you're saving to make sure that you're doing okay? But now let's think about tomorrow. And for those people that have financial goals that may not have a savings account, or that do have a savings account but haven't achieved their financial goals, what can I be doing today with those funds to make sure that I'm secure tomorrow? Something happened this week, it was actually end of last week, that kind of threw me a little bit. I don't know if anybody's heard of Foodora. Foodora is a big food delivery company.
Sure.
And you'd think that, oh my goodness, this is like prime time for them, right? And yet, very quickly, within 2 weeks, they're going to be gone out of Canada, and they're one of the biggest ones there. Well, how did that happen? I know there's a lot of reasons why that happened, but I'm more thinking about the people that had jobs there. They're thinking, wow, they're in a booming business, and then all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under them. So we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So let's take advantage of what we've got today and start thinking about making sure that we're planning for tomorrow. And that could take shape in all different ways. And I know you and I have talked about that.
Yeah, I know. And I was going to say, it's interesting because from an EPB perspective, we are most concerned about those that are on the dire straits and need support and need handholding. But we are then probably the second group of people that we are most worried about are kind of professionals between the ages of 45 and 60 who have maybe kids at home. They haven't really gone back for any sort of real education over the last couple of years, but they've got steady jobs. They're still working today. They're working from home. They're doing their stuff, and they think that they're comfortable. And we are so exceptionally worried about that group of people because people, even companies, are now starting to see, for instance, efficiencies when people are working at home, and they say, wait a second, we could probably do the same amount of work with less people. We could do all these things. And if people have not retrained, if they haven't retooled, if they haven't really thought about the future of work, it can be disastrous for them in the future. And these tend to be the people that have that 6 month plus of savings, so they don't look at any of these opportunities or any of these benefits. And then when they do start to burn through those things, and they, hopefully not, but sometimes if they end up in a bad situation, they're now 6 months behind everybody else. And they may have lost the opportunity to apply for certain things. And so, why don't we, Jeff, jump into this idea of like, what are we eligible for and how do we think about it? And so with that, I'd like to take us right to the Economic Planning Board website, which I'm just going to pull up here so everyone can see. And with that, we're going to, if you come over to the iicanada.org/EPB website, you'll see a series of things here around the different support structures that are available for economic and general supports. And if you come in here and specifically go down to the Government of Canada Financial Support Programs, where I know that, Jeff, you and I want to focus today. First of all, there's a lot of other things for everyone here. But if you come into this specific tab, where you go is to the actual Government of Canada website that talks about all of the possible programs. that are available to you. And maybe Jeff, I know this is one of your favorite pages lately, so do you want to take us through and tell us where, or different things or highlights that people may want to be aware of on this website?
It's funny because I'm the guy that doesn't like reading government publications because I'm usually asleep after the second paragraph and they just go on for pages and pages. But my goodness, this page really kind of targets people. Like on this page, support for individuals. So who are you and why do you want to reach this page? Are you talking about yourself as an individual? Are you talking about yourself as being self-employed or a business? And are there specific sectors that you're interested in? And really, it's just kind of diving in. I mean, my daughter's a student at a university, and I said, okay, well, what's going to happen with you working this summer? Where are you going to be at? Because it's not going to be like you thought it is. And all of a sudden, there's a whole section for students on there, and they've made a couple of announcements this week, and she's all over it. And I said, fantastic. And it couldn't have been simpler. And it's the same for individuals. So there's going to be opportunities out there. We really need to understand what they are and how to get at them. And it's just as simple as clicking on a link, and it tells you if you're eligible or not. There's a whole section. I mean, if we click on one of these, Ellie.
Yeah, please tell me which one would you like me to take your pick.
It's like we're start with the individuals.
Okay.
Temporary top up for low income or essential workers, or something along those lines. Let's just see what pops up. But it gives you.
I think this one I know. Yeah, I know this one's coming up soon. So let's go to this one, the increase in child benefits. I know that's one that's applicable right now for people.
And right there, just right there in the middle, it says apply. Like it tells you who it's relatable to or relevant to, and apply. Yeah. And it's as simple as that. So just getting to this page, and I think, you put it there. I think if you put it in the that link in the chat, and I'd suggest that people just kind of copy this and paste it somewhere on their computers. It's just so easy to figure out what supports are available. And you want to check on this on a regular basis because it's always changing. This is one of those things that if you bookmark this page, then you're going to start to gain more and more information as they update it, because some of these programs may be announced, but it might be a week or two before they actually allow you to open up that portal to apply for it. So you want to keep changing and looking for that new information.
Well, and so I put the EPB website in the chat. I've also put this website in the chat. There'll be a couple other websites that we go to. I think it's important for people to come back and visit these regularly. Also visit the Economic Planning Board website regularly, because we have stuff, and we will be actually releasing a specific publication, like an electronic al-akhbar, specifically just for economic related topics for the Jamaat, so that it's focused for people who need those areas with updates on a regular basis. So stay tuned for a lot of the stuff that's coming up from that perspective. But yeah,
before you leave there, Ali,
to look at this. Of course.
Sorry to cut you off there. Before you leave there, because I noticed the demographic of a bunch of the people that are on the webinar, they were on the senior side and or the retirement side, or that was of interest to them. I mean, there's certain things in here that are really going to have some impact to you around how you can help yourself that may not have been available before. So it's definitely worthwhile kind of just diving into this and saying, okay. And the way they've written it, to me, it's amazing. It's not those two paragraphs and I'm asleep. It's really easy for most people to understand and see where it's applicable or relevant to their situation.
Yeah, and there are some like incredible things here. Like for instance, this idea of like the New Horizons program. In fact, this wasn't here last week, so this is new if I'm even looking at it, because it talks about the fact that look, they will supporting seniors and staying connected with their community, providing electronic devices, visual activities, remote tutorials. So there are so many different things that I'm just going to click on that and bookmark it for myself. I have to go back and look at that later. But I think it's interesting in terms of there are so many different programs and services that people need to be aware of. And, you know, we want to bring people back to even the EPB website, because we'll be updating it regularly. And there's a bunch of stuff on here, including other tools that can help them navigate those sorts of areas. You know, I think the other thing too is we were talking a little bit about this concept of how do you then shift and pivot from the concept of today to tomorrow, and you know, and then there's also the idea of like allocating funds. So do you want me to go back first? And actually, let's go back and let's talk a little bit about the concept of allocating funds, Jeff, that I know that we wanted to cover, and then I want to come back to the tomorrow will be different from today. So when we're talking a little about this concept of allocating funds, so let's say, for instance, we've gone through, we've applied for these benefits, Now we've gotten some money. So we've gotten some funds in different regards. How should we think about where to best allocate or utilize these funds?
So first and foremost, and depending on the people that responded to the poll, first and foremost, from an individual perspective, you want to make sure that you've created a savings fund of 3 to 6 months. And that's a really important aspect of what we're talking about today, and not there for some people. One of the things that we talked about at length is that life happens. We have these unexpected expenses. We get a flat tire, we broke a tooth, whatever it might be that takes us out of our budget. And what we're seeing, and this was one of the biggest surprises to me when I entered into this industry, was 50% of the Canadians, and it goes up or down by 1 or 2% each year, are living paycheck to paycheck. And what that signals to me is they don't have any savings. If they can't live without one paycheck, that means, and that's going to send them into debt, that means they don't have any savings. And I go back to the 70s, and people used to save at probably close to 20%. Now it's less than 5%. So that's one of the things that we really want to make sure that people take away from this. And one of the reasons why is that if you have that unexpected expense, or if you want to do something that's unexpected and you have to pay for it, and you have no savings, then how are you going to pay for it? You're going into debt. You're taking on more debt. So that's really taking 2 steps back. And in order for us to get away from that, we have to allocate some of those funds to making sure that we have that savings plan. Secondarily,
so what percentage? Oh, sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, what percentage? Like you said, in the 1970s, it was like 20%. Now it's 5%. If you think a little bit about it, if I have $1, where do I spend that dollar? Do I spend it on paying off debt, putting it into savings, or investing it? Like, how do I think about that equation, or that kind of the recipe for where to put my money?
So first things first, I know that, and this is where I was going with that example, is that even though you might be carrying credit card debt of 20%, if you have that unexpected expense, you're just going to build up that debt even more unless you have the savings account. So I really want people to focus in on creating that savings account. Once that's done, I want them to start paying off debt. And it's really a mathematical equation. If you're carrying debt at 20% versus investing it at 3%, the math is really simple, right? I mean, if you're investing at 3%, or even if you're investing it at 10%, the point is you're still carrying debt at 20%. It's not a good mathematical equation, and your money isn't working efficiently for you. So you really want to find a way to pay down that expensive debt. And what we suggest is it's kind of the snowball effect. So in other words, pay down your most expensive debt, because that's going to give you the most efficient use of your cash flow, and then get to your next most expensive debt and slowly chip away at it. And then when you're talking about investment, then start thinking about investment. Now, it comes a difficult question, and I'm a poster child for this, is should I be investing in my RSP, or should I be paying down debt, or like my mortgage or something like that? And it really becomes almost like a preference. But I lost about 10 years of my RSP contributions because I was starting a family and all those sorts of things that I had a ton of expenses on. And then I kicked myself, I should have been at least investing something small, because I lost all that growth 20 years ago because I didn't invest in my RSP. So it becomes a mathematical equation, but it's also a personal preference that you don't want to lose. But I don't want to confuse people, but think about emergency savings account first, think about your expensive debt, and then start weighing it against investments.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think, I'm going to ask a question as I flip over to another website, which is, Jeff, from your perspective, what is the best way that you think people can analyze their financial health, specifically for like a working class, fixed income class, et cetera? Like, where do they get a sense of like, oh, I'm in trouble, I'm not in trouble, how do I think about this?
That's a tough question. I'm going to suggest to you that, first off, you want to measure yourself against your budget. Am I living within my means? But like everything else, and a bunch of people on this webinar seem to have done some sort of planning, especially if they're using a budget. It takes shape in the form of a plan. And have you made some financial goals? If you set your goals in an effective manner, I want like we use the term SMART goals, if you will. If I've achieved a certain amount of retirement savings by a certain point, then that's really healthy. If I've got a savings account of 3 to 6 months for emergencies, that's really healthy. If I'm contributing to my retirement and investments each and every year, that's really healthy. If I'm not doing that, then I got to reevaluate my budget and see what's going wrong so that I can achieve these financial goals that I set. So to bring it all back is I would start with some realistic goals and then measure yourself against those goals. If you're not achieving those goals, then we got to take it back to why you're not and what can we do around our financial situation so that we start chipping away at those financial goals.
Perfect. And I want to get into that and now get into the KOFE website in more detail. But before we do that, a couple of specific things I wanted to cover. The first of which is we're referring a little bit to those professionals, but it really is the entire Jamaat that needs to think a little bit about this concept of how do we use this opportunity to retool, to repivot, to rebuild. And one of the things that I want to just give everyone here and consider the people that are on this webinar as the first people to see this, but basically we have a sneak peek at the future of work website that the Economic Planning Board and the team have been developing for almost 6 to 7 months now. And this website basically goes through the entire concept of what is going on, how does the future of work affect me, what are specific industries that are going to be affected, and then what can I do about it? What are specific retooling abilities that I can use in order to further myself, to retool, to get more education that will allow me to retool what I'm doing and how to pivot. And so, just a quick sneak peek that this is about to be launched and that you'll be hearing more about this very shortly from the Jamaat's perspective. So with that, I'm going to bring it right back here to where we were on the slides, and particularly, let's go on to the next thing, Jeff, really quickly, because I'm mindful of time and I want to get into some of the KOFE stuff. But let's talk about debt for a second, and let's talk about understanding, what's the big issue with debt, and also like how do we think about this from an interesting perspective? And people say now that, okay, well, our parents, they all paid off their houses, but most millennials today have to be used to the fact that they'll never actually pay off their mortgage, or I know we hear all these sorts of things. So when we say how can I reduce my debt, why is it important, and then how do we start to think about this and really approach it with a different mentality?
Well, there's good debt and bad debt, but the reality is many Canadians are carrying a ton of the bad debt, and that's the high interest rate credit card debt that is acting as an anchor around everybody's neck, and it's holding them back from achieving their financial goals. And as soon as we get it into our heads that that's not helping us, that is what's holding us back from achieving our financial goals, that's when we can really start to pay attention to this and move this up our priorities so that we can start reducing this in an effective manner. And one of the things that has occurred to me and my family during this time is it's amazing how much slower the world is working now over the last 6 weeks. It's spending time with family, spending time with loved ones, spending time with yourself, going on walks. It's all those things that are allowing us to slow down and appreciate things. We're not going out in the hustle bustle of the malls. We're not going out spending. And that's really allowed us to take life from a different viewpoint than we have. And these are certain things that I hope people don't forget once we start coming out of this thing, because the reality is we're mentally in that spot. Now we can start using some of the tools to start getting rid of that anchor of debt. And I think we started about 15 minutes ago talking about how we assess our situation by creating that budget, assess where we are, what's the benchmark of where we are right now, figuring out what debts we have, what we have to pay off first. And then once we've done that, along with our budget, then we can start tweaking it so we can find that additional money. I don't like saying additional money, reallocating that money towards what we should be doing. And that's paying down that debt as quickly as we possibly can. And there's so many different options. Now, you used an example about the question that said, well, a family wants to declare bankruptcy. And I kind of went through it, but at the end of this, people may be so indebted that they're saying, oh my goodness, like even if I listen to Jeff and put a little bit of money away each and every month, it's going to take me 12 years to get out of this thing. Like, why not start with a fresh start today? and utilize that option of bankruptcy if that's your last resort. But at least you're not living, you're living this kind of with this anchor around your neck for the next 12 years. And that's a real struggle. And I think people are going to get to that point once we come through this.
So should we talk a little bit about, so I know there's like bankruptcy, but there's also these things like negotiated debt settlements, right? And so like what impact do negotiated debt settlements have on your credit? You know, is it beneficial to go that route before you go down the path and decide, oh my God, I have to declare bankruptcy? Like, how would you advise people to think about this, and how do you understand the different options available to you when you are in a difficult point and you feel like there isn't a lot of easy ways out?
So first I'd say talk to a credit counselor. It's free. You're going to get an assessment, and they're going to take you through all the options and they're going to look at your specific individual budget to get to those options. They're going to look at your financial goals so that you can get to those solutions. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the best one you can do that doesn't affect your credit is some sort of do-it-yourself option, right? Whether it's a consolidation loan or a balance transfer on a credit card with lower rates, but it really depends on you. Or it could be family and friends, right? It could be anything that's going to get you to a lower, more efficient use of your cash. The next one is probably going to be some sort of debt management program that Consolidated offers. So we work with the creditors and the consumers. We act as an intermediary, and because they're working through a credit counseling agency, we can get their debt interest rates reduced down to zero. So whether it's 35%, whether it's 20%, in most cases it's down to zero. Sometimes it's as high as 5%. But what does that mean? That means you're paying off your debt in a much more efficient manner. It's less expensive. We can get rid of it. So you see on your credit card statement, if you make the minimum payment, it's going to take you 70 years to pay it off. No, we try and get you out of debt within 3.5 to 4 years. Then we move into those negotiated settlements. And those are typically through a licensed insolvency trustee, an LIT. And whether that's a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy, that's going to have the biggest impact on your credit, no question about it, but it's going to be the least expensive way to do it. There are companies out there that do informal debt settlements. The fees are exceptionally high, and I'd suggest you stay away from that. You probably want to go more the legal route through a licensed insolvency trustee. So you start at one end, it's the do-it-yourself, where it has little impact through maybe a consolidation loan, and you go down to the other end where it might be an insolvency like a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal.
So let's talk a little bit about Consolidated Credit and a little bit more about like what you do, and I'm going to take people to the website. But before I do that, I'm going to throw up another poll here. And what I'd like to understand from people is, if you knew the COVID-19 pandemic would have such a huge economic impact, would you have prepared differently? And I'd love to just get people's kind of like overall thoughts on what they think here. And you know, one of the reasons that I wanted to ask this question is because people, this question is asked in a past tense way, as if the pandemic is over. And I think one of the things that we want to make sure that people understand is that this pandemic is nowhere close to being over. In fact, I would argue from a lot of the reading I've been doing, particularly even just this week, that the new world is going to be the world pre-COVID and the world with COVID. And that for the foreseeable future, COVID is going to be here. Now, our reactions to it, how we handle it, how we look at it, etc., that's going to change. But the pandemic is nowhere close to over. And so for people who are, you know, on this poll, basically saying, yes, I would have planned differently, or yes, but I don't know how, or, you know, those sorts of things. Well, this is the chance to say, let's help you prepare differently now. Because if we can do that properly, then we can really help you going to the next step. So I'm just going to close the poll and share the results here so everyone can see them. But basically, Jeff, as you'll see this, as we're walking into the next section around KOFE and Consolidated Credit, you know, we have like over 50%, you know, close to 60% would basically say, yes, I would have prepared differently. And I think that's an interesting place for us to start this next conversation, which is around, okay, let's understand what KOFE is, let's understand what Consolidated Credit is, and let's see what's available to us. And I'm just looking at time. We've got about 10 minutes, Jeff, for the whole webinar. So I'm gonna keep us kind of as focused as we can, which is going to be hard because I know we've got such awesome topics, but let's jump right into the Consolidated Credit website, because again, I want to remind the Jamaat that we have a relationship with Consolidated Credit, which means that we actually have a free service that any member of the Jamaat can sign up for. It's fl.coffeetime.ca, and I'll put that into the chat window here. I'll get one of my team to do that while we're doing the rest. And you sign up right down here. You can log in. So I'll just log in with my password to the Ismaili Council Coffee Canada site, which is really important for people to understand that this has been tweaked and does for us. Now, Jeff, I know there's a ton of stuff here and we have a limited amount of time today, but where would you like us to spend a couple of minutes just to give people a sense of what's here?
Well, we're going to go to Coffee Maker first and just hit the drop-down menu. But before we get there, one of the things that I want to talk about is, how are you using this opportunity? Because one of the poll questions was yes, no, but I don't know how. And are we using this opportunity to grow? Are we using this opportunity to learn? What could we be doing differently while we have this time to enhance our well-being, enhance and potentially rebuild for the future if things change, and put us in a better spot? Coffee is a perfect opportunity for that because it's so easy. You can do it simply on your own. And that's why this relationship with you guys has been fantastic, because you're so on top of making sure that these opportunities are available. So I'm thrilled with that, and that's why I was thrilled to participate. So we go to the Coffee Maker, and one of the things, actually, if we actually go to the interactive courses first, because this really dovetails well on the growth aspect of it. We may have all sorts of knowledge in certain areas of finance, but perhaps we don't. And if you look down the right side of that sheet, we've got, I think, 11 or 12 different modules, and they take us through budgeting, saving, smart spending, managing debt, a lot of the things that we have some information on, but maybe we need a little bit more. And it's a totally interactive course. There's a little quiz at the end of each module. And then once you're completed all the modules, there's a certificate available. And really, that's going to give you a great building block for your financial foundation. So, I mean, these are something that is easy to do. You can do it on your own time, and it's meant to be accessible for everybody. And you know what?
And I know you can earn certificates through this. And I know you can earn certificates, and there's a lot of great things that are here. But you can even earn certificates for being a credit dojo, which I know is part of this thing as well. And, Jeff, as we're going through this, there's a lot of questions around students who are asking, like, what do I do? How do I think about this? How do I, if I get accepted to a really expensive program, do I take on the debt to do that? Do I take on subsidies as a student? How do I start to think about my financial situation and want to invest my money? And so this is a good place to come because there's a lot of different things that people can be doing. And at any point, if I'm not mistaken, you can ask the coach or you can just call. It's free of charge. It's part of the relationship we have with Consolidated Credit and Coffee to be able to call and get help and to talk about that sort of stuff. But if you were a student, where would you send me first, Jeff?
I want to understand your budget. I want you to have that building block of building a budget, because regardless of who you are and what you are, that's going to change. You need to be able to use it actively and regularly, and you need to understand what goes in and how it works for you, because this is something that's going to change throughout your life, and you might as well get used to doing it now. Now, if you don't want to use this, that's fine. There are so many different tools and resources out there. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but this is a fantastic place to start, and it spits out something once you're done. It gives you an idea of where you stand in comparison to what the norm is or what certain things that you should be. Now, these are some of the things that...
I'll do this at the next slide because I did take a picture of it, but you're right. Like you can put your budget in here, and then this is the ideal. So you can tell really quickly, well, what are you off base with, right? In terms of what you should have versus what you actually have.
Very simple tool. One of those things that you want to be able to present to a bank if you're going to go into debt for your education is, well, how are you planning to make this work? So you may want to do your debt to income ratio. You may want to talk about what your financial goals are. What opportunities are there out for you? There's, on this site is load. If you go back to Coffee, I think it was Coffee Table. Go one over there. There's financial calculators. No,
that's in here. That's the financial calculator here in Coffee Maker.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've got all sorts of different things. Are you paying too much in your credit cards? If I save this much a month and I'm earning this much interest, how much will I have? So there's lots of different things in here that are simple to use and laid out for you.
And I thought, one thing that was that publications, right, that we were talking about earlier today. So I wanted to make sure we got to that. So there's so many things here around everything. And I think life events you were telling me about today, which I thought was really interesting, like cutting car costs, when love, money, marriage come together, divorce and credit, identity theft, like so many super vital things that would be really helpful for people to understand or at least know about.
And these are meant to be read in kind of 15, 20 minutes, very simple language. And like this seminar, we're hoping that you take some resources away from this that you can put into action as soon as you finish reading it. So this site is full of things. Now, I mean, Ali touched on something that is really important to us, that if this medium doesn't work for you, pick up the phone and call. If you like the human connection and you don't want to, we'll help direct you to it, or we'll even talk you through it and do a budget for you. We'll walk you through what you need to do. Eventually, you're going to get to be a pro at it and you want to do it on your own. But if it just means taking that first step, then give us a call and we'll help you with it.
Contact us. And I'm just conscious time is always of essence when we get into such great conversations. So one, call, email, go on to the website. I put it in the chat link for everyone that is not there. Apparently, the link is not working for KOFE, so I will send it to everybody again here just so they have it, and we'll make sure people have it. I think there's a question here about credit score and how often I check it, etc. So I guess the question I'll say to that one is, if you guys sign up for this and you come into your interactive courses, I believe there's a Credit Dojo course specifically on credit scores. So if people would like to do that, they can for sure. I want to just take one more second to just come over to say, there are many tools that are available for members of the Jamaat if you're looking to help in any sort of way. We talked about the KOFE budget tool that's right here, and it allows you to kind of go through and look at what your ideal amount should be versus what you have. There's Mint, which is a passive way to be able to get all of your credit, like all of your bank information can all go into one place. I know that we use this in our household regularly, and it puts everything together, helps you create a budget, helps you monitor things. Or Milo, which is another app which basically rounds up your purchases by little amounts, and it puts it towards savings accounts or other stuff. And I know that Riz from our team made me sign up for Milo a couple of months ago, and just by rounding up coffee purchases and just adding a couple of specific goals, before I knew it, a couple of $100 every month was starting to accumulate. And it was because every purchase I made, it rounded it up by a nickel or by a quarter. And so little things like that are such important things that can be helpful. I know some people have asked about these slides, which we'll make sure we send out to all the attendees on this so people have it. And then also just the fact that your bank themselves will give you access to credit scores. In fact, you can have free credit score viewing through your bank and through its online portal. So make sure you check that out. I'm going into the last 2 minutes here, but Jeff, before I kind of do a couple of things on what's coming up on our side, any kind of final thoughts? I know that we could probably spend a couple hours and not gotten through everything, but wanted to get any final thoughts from you before I close off with a couple of slides around things to look forward to and upcoming.
Okay, just two things. One is, and we've talked about this a lot, is take stock. Do an assessment of yourself and where you're at. Take the time to lay out your statements, take a look at your bank statements, take a look at your credit card bills, all your expenses, and take stock. Get yourself a benchmark measurement of where you are right now, because that's really going to be the building block of where you can go and how you set your financial goals. The second thing is take advantage of the supports that are out there. Don't be ashamed. And I pause there because I don't want you to be ashamed and say, listen, I don't need it today. It's better for somebody else. But no, think about the Fedora people. Think about those people, and you could be one of them, and all of a sudden, your life changes. It's a new technology. It's a new way to do business. Your business has to shut down, and then tomorrow it's all different, and you weren't prepared. So we saw kind of 50, 60% of the people said they would do it differently if they had known about this. It's not too late. Start small. You've got your stock. You've got your assessment, and then you can make those changes as need be.
Yeah, look, I think it's been so helpful to have you on today. I mean, there were so many things you talked about today. We started off by the aspect of the fact that calling for help, like 80% of the people that utilize your services are not people that are just looking to, they are just looking to improve their financial health. And that frankly, everyone should be looking to improve their financial health. And we're almost like, it's almost like we're ignorant. It's almost like we're at fault if we don't take the time to think about that right now. And that at the end of the day, you need to think about the fact that you have to keep informed. Take that stock like you've talked about. 50% of Canadians are paying, or 55% are living paycheck to paycheck. So there's probably a lot of people on this webinar today that are living paycheck to paycheck. Let's get you out of that. Where do you put your money? And people were talking about investments and other stuff. And I know a lot of people asked about investments today. This was not the right webinar for that, but there are many webinars coming up as well as ways to think about investments. And we will be touching upon that more within the EPB context in the next little bit. But ultimately, think about where to put your money and think about paying down your debt, but create a savings account first. Like think about the emergency savings, because otherwise you're going to be pulling on that debt later and it's going to be hard. From a financial perspective, how do you assess your financial health? Well, you know what? And how do I be practical about this? Call, engage, and really like talk to the people at KOFE. Is one of the major places that you can go. And we talked about this today. This is a free service that we've negotiated with the community. We have a long-standing partnership and something that is free and helpful to you in so many ways. And then lastly, as we're thinking through this, we want to say, look, if you're worried, take the time to look up, to call, email, like just ask questions. We are there to help you. And ultimately, the future of work is coming up soon. We want to make sure that Jamaat is ready for this. They want to make sure that everyone looks at the opportunities to do so and realizes that there are always decisions, good decisions and bad decisions, just like debt. There's good decisions and there's good debt, there's bad debt. Let's make sure that you make some good decisions as you're going through. I just want to close off by saying that ultimately, the Jamaati Access Line is here to help everyone, every member of the Jamaat. It doesn't matter what segment you are. It doesn't matter what your needs are. Ultimately, we're here to help, and we want people to access us in the best way possible. Call, email, visit us, sign up for the Al Akbar, but please, please, please give us the chance to help. Don't be in a position where 6 months from today you said, well, I should have called, I didn't. I should have done this, but I didn't. I think our financial future, our Jamaat's financial future, and ultimately listening to Haji Imam Salika is saying, you need to position yourself to build, to rebuild, to position and pivot, and we want to be here to help. So call if you need anything. Visit the websites regularly, but please stay in touch, please stay engaged, and inshallah, everything will be there because we are working together and holding hands while we do it. Jeff, I want to thank you so much. Such an awesome presentation, so much to cover, but this has been really helpful and really appreciative of your time, and good night to everyone.